The retreat. The Galactic Alliance fleet drifted in formation, their ships gleaming against the darkness of space. For over 3 centuries, the Alliance had stood as a beacon of cooperation among advanced species. Humans had only joined 30 years ago, and many still viewed them as primitive newcomers. Captain Alan Brooks stood on the bridge of the Gas Defiant, watching the tactical display with growing concern. Intelligence had warned about Vorax activity in this sector, but the Alliance admirals dismissed it. The Vorax were a hive-mind species that consumed everything in their path, and they were not to be underestimated. "Sir, multiple warp signatures detected," called out Lieutenant Greg Wilson from the sensor station. "Pattern matches Vorax swarm ships." Brooks' jaw tightened. "Battle stations. Shield configuration Delta." The alarm blared throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their positions. The Defiant was primarily staffed by humans, with a few Alliance observers on board. Zebrak Commander Krell, the Alliance liaison, approached Brooks with mandibles clicking in agitation. "Captain, the proper protocol is to engage immediately with full firepower." "With respect, Commander, I'm doing what will keep my crew alive," Brooks replied calmly. On the main view screen, the first wave of Vorax ships emerged from warp. They resembled massive metallic insects, their hulls bristling with biomechanical weapons. The Alliance battleships responded immediately, unleashing impressive volleys of energy weapons. Alliance flagship Celestial Harmony taking heavy fire, reported Communications Officer Nicole Reeves. "They're requesting assistance." Brooks watched as the supposedly superior alien warriors froze in the face of the Vorax's unexpected tactics. The enemy vessels were sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. "They're using swarm logic," Brooks muttered. "Helm, evasive pattern Charlie. Weapons, target the lead ship's propulsion systems." The Defiant banked sharply, avoiding the main thrust of the Vorax attack while picking off vulnerable targets. Other human captain ships followed their example, creating a loose defensive formation. "Captain, the Ultharian battlecruiser Invincible is not responding to hails," said Reeves. "Their shields are failing." Brooks made a quick decision. "Move us between the Invincible and the Vorax. Deploy countermeasures and redirect shield power to the facing side." Commander Krell hissed in disapproval. "You flee from direct engagement. This is human cowardice. This is staying alive." Brooks shot back as the Defiant shuddered under enemy fire. The Defiant's maneuvers allowed the crippled Ultharian ship to retreat, but the overall battle was going poorly. The Alliance's rigid battle formations were being torn apart by the adaptable Vorax. "Sir, the Celestial Harmony has suffered critical damage," Reeves reported grimly. "The Alliance Council members are aboard." Brooks surveyed the tactical situation. The proud Alliance fleet was in disarray, their superior technology proving useless against the Vorax's savage efficiency. "Open channel to all human ships," Brooks ordered. "Channel open." "Sir." "All human vessels, this is Captain Brooks. Form defensive screen around the Celestial Harmony. We're covering the retreat." Human crewed ships broke from their positions, drawing Vorax fire as they moved to protect the Alliance flagship. The Defiant rocked violently as it absorbed multiple hits. "Shields at 40%, reported Tactical Officer Frank Murphy. "Sir, we're receiving communications from multiple Alliance vessels," said Reeves. "They're calling us cowards for not pressing the attack." Brooks smiled grimly. "Let them talk. We'll be alive to hear it." The human ships continued their defensive maneuvers, focusing on protection rather than glory. They used terrain, deployed decoys, and executed precise withdrawals, tactics that earned them mockery from their allies but kept ships intact. Gradually, the Alliance fleet began to retreat in good order under the protection of the human vessels. "The Harmony is clear, Captain," Reeves announced. "Alliance command is signaling full withdrawal." Brooks nodded, exhaustion evident on his face. "Take us out, Lieutenant. Let's live to fight another day." As the Defiant turned to follow the retreating fleet, The bridge crew worked in focused silence, ignoring the insults still flowing through the comms. They knew what the other species didn't. Sometimes courage meant doing the unpopular thing. Sometimes survival was victory enough. The decision. The celestial harmony limped through space, its once beautiful hull now scared and broken. Emergency lights flickered throughout the massive vessel as repair crews worked frantically. In the main council chamber, representatives from 23 species gathered around the circular table, their voices rising in heated debate. Ambassador Lily Carter sat quietly, listening as alien delegates argued. As Earth's representative, she was still considered an outsider by many. The human woman's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the agitation of the others. "The outer colonies must be abandoned," declared Supreme General Vexthor, his scaled skin flushing purple with emotion. "We cannot risk our main fleet against the Voraks again." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The recent defeat had shaken the Alliance's confidence. Ambassador Zuri of the Pellerin floated gently above her seat, her translucent body pulsing with light. "What of the colonists? Millions will perish if we withdraw completely." "Regrettable casualties of war," replied Vexthor coldly. Carter finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Earth proposes an alternative. We can lead an evacuation mission to the outer colonies." The chamber fell silent before erupting in dismissive laughter. "Typical human thinking," sneered Councillor Drath. "Always looking for ways to run away." Carter remained unruffled. "We prefer to call it living to fight another day. A skill your fleet could have benefited from yesterday." Drath's facial tentacles coiled in anger, but Alliance Chairperson Ilara raised her hand for silence. "Explain your proposal, Ambassador Carter." Carter stood and approached the holographic display in the center of the room. "Since joining the Alliance, humans have established evacuation protocols for all our colonial outposts. We've trained specifically for rapid civilian extraction under fire." She activated the display, showing detailed evacuation plans. "We don't need the main fleet. Give us command of available transport ships and smaller escorts. We can get those people out." "Without directly engaging the Voraks?" asked Ilara. "How?" "By doing what humans do best, being cowards," Carter said with a small smile. "Hit-and-run tactics, diversions, and strategic retreats." The council erupted again, this time in heated discussion. Carter returned to her seat as the aliens debated. After an hour, Chairperson Ilara called for a vote. By a narrow margin, the council approved the human plan, if only because they had no better options. As the meeting adjourned, Carter found Captain Brooks waiting outside. His uniform still showed signs of the recent battle. "How did it go?" he asked. They agreed, reluctantly. "We've been given operational control of available evacuation ships." They walked together down a quiet corridor, away from the alien delegates. "You know what they're saying about us," Brooks said. "That humans don't have the backbone for real combat." Carter stopped at a viewport, gazing at the stars. "They don't understand us, Alan. They evolved as apex predators on peaceful worlds. Humans fought our way up from the middle of the food chain. Survival over glory." Brooks nodded. "Exactly. Every human conflict has taught us that lesson. The Americans at Valley Forge, the Russian retreat before Napoleon, guerrilla fighters throughout history. We've learned that sometimes walking away from a fight is the smartest move." Brooks looked troubled. "The colonies are spread across 3 sectors. Even with our tactics, we can't save everyone." "No," Carter agreed sadly. "But we'll save more than they would. I need you to lead this mission, Alan. You're the only one who truly understands what we're facing." Brooks straightened his shoulders. "When do we start?" "Immediately. They're already calling it Operation Sanctuary. Appropriate, don't you think?" "Very. And when we succeed, maybe they'll stop calling us cowards." Carter smiled grimly. "I doubt it, but they might start surviving long enough to insult us in person." They shook hands, 2 humans preparing to do what their species had always done best, adapting to survive against overwhelming odds. Operation Sanctuary. The makeshift evacuation fleet, assembled at the edge of the Proxima system, looked nothing like the polished Alliance Armada. Cargo ships, retrofitted civilian vessels, and a handful of smaller military craft formed an odd collection of mismatched hulls. At the center, the gas Defiant served as the command ship. Captain Brooks studied the tactical display on the bridge, marking potential escape routes. Next to him stood Lieutenant Susan Miller, a tactical specialist with short brown hair and intense focus. Proxima 9 has approximately 50,000 colonists, Miller reported. The mining facilities are spread across 3 main settlements. Brooks nodded. The Vorax will be drawn to the power signatures from the mining equipment. We'll need to shut those down first. A communication came through from the planet's surface. The face of Governor Paul Jackson appeared on screen, his expression grim. Captain Brooks, my people are ready for evacuation, but we've got a problem. Our long-range sensors detected Vorax scout ships entering the system. How long do we have? Brooks asked. 8 hours, maybe less. Brooks exchanged glances with Miller. Start the evacuation immediately. Priority to children, medical cases, and essential personnel. Jackson's image flickered. What about our equipment? Generations of work. People first, Brooks interrupted firmly. Everything else is replaceable. As the communication ended, Miller leaned closer to Brooks. Sir, we could deploy sensor decoys to draw the Vorax away from the evacuation lanes. Do it, and prepare the Minnesota and the Oregon for rearguard action. Word spread quickly through the fleet. Human crews prepared while Alliance observers watched with skepticism. Zarkshin Commander Trell, assigned to monitor the operation, approached Brooks. Your strategy involves running before the battle even begins, Trell observed, his metallic voice tinged with disapproval. Our strategy involves saving lives, Commander. The battle is secondary. Trell's robotic eyes whirred as they refocused. The Alliance would never. The Alliance isn't here, Brooks cut in. We are. The evacuation began with practiced efficiency. Human crews had drilled for scenarios like this, their movements quick and coordinated. Transport ships descended to the surface while the military vessels formed a protective screen. 6 hours later, the first Vorax scouts appeared at the system's edge. They've detected us, Miller announced. 3 scout ships changing course to intercept. Brooks remained calm. Deploy the decoys. Dakota and Wisconsin, execute pattern Echo. 2 human ships broke formation, heading directly toward the Vorax scouts. They fired a series of short bursts before quickly veering away. The Vorax ships gave chase, drawn from the main evacuation corridor. 70% of colonists evacuated, reported Communications Officer Reeves. Transport Group Alpha is clear of the atmosphere. The decoy strategy worked for nearly 2 hours before the Vorax adapted. A larger force emerged from warp, cutting directly toward the planet. They'd figured us out, Miller said. New Vorax formation approaching, at least 15 vessels. Brooks studied the tactical display. Bring the Oregon and Minnesota back. All evacuation ships, accelerate timetable. We need everyone off that planet in 30 minutes. The human fleet shifted, employing quick strike and fade maneuvers that confused the Vorax. Individual ships took hits but continued functioning as they covered the transports. Commander Trell watched with growing interest. Your ships never stand and fight. They retreat, regroup, strike from new angles. It's called mobility warfare, Brooks explained, as the Defiant shook from a glancing hit. The goal isn't to destroy the enemy, but to accomplish our mission. As the last transports lifted off, the Vorax closed in. The Defiant took heavy damage covering their escape, but Brooks ordered a final diversionary attack that scattered the Vorax forces long enough for the evacuation fleet to reach the jump point. When they finally entered warp, the bridge crew erupted in tired cheers. Of the 50,000 colonists, 47,850 had been saved. The cost, 3 human ships lost and 7 damage. Commander Trell approached Brooks again. "I must admit, Captain, your retreat was surprisingly effective." Brooks simply nodded, already planning the next evacuation. This was just the beginning of Operation Sanctuary. The learning curve. The Alliance cruiser Eternal Vigilance glided alongside the human evacuation fleet. Inside its grand strategy chamber, a scene unfolded that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Elite alien military leaders sat attentively as Lieutenant Susan Miller explained human battle tactics. "In Earth's Second World War," Miller said, pointing to simple animations on the display, "Russian forces retreated before the German advance, trading space for time while preserving their army." Admiral Vexthor leaned forward, his reptilian features tense with concentration. "They surrendered territory willingly. Where is the honor in that?" "The honor came later," Miller replied calmly, "when they survived to retake everything they had lost. The Germans extended their supply lines and faced the Russian winter unprepared." Across the table, Commander Zefik of the Brantarian Guard tapped his claws impatiently. "These are ancient battles fought by primitives. How does this apply to space warfare against the Voraks?" Miller changed the display to show the recent evacuation of Proxima 9. "The principles remain the same. Space provides abundant room for maneuver. By refusing direct confrontation and focusing on our objective, we saved nearly 48,000 lives." In another part of the ship, Captain Brooks reviewed plans with his officers. The tactical board showed their next 3 evacuation targets. "New Salem is next," Brooks said. 15,000 colonists, mostly agricultural workers. The door slid open as Ambassador Carter entered. "The Alliance Council is impressed with your results, Captain." Reluctantly impressed, but impressed nonetheless. Brooks smiled thinly. "Tell them to save their praise. We've got 3 more colonies to evacuate before the Voraks main fleet arrives." Carter sat heavily in a nearby chair. "The Pelleran representative asked me something interesting today. She wanted to know why humans train for retreat scenarios." "What did you tell her?" "That on Earth, we learned the hard way that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a fight you can't win." 3 days later, the fleet approached New Salem. Intelligence reports indicated Voraks' presence had increased throughout the sector. The human ships adopted new formations based on Lieutenant Miller's analysis of Voraks' attack patterns. As the evacuation began, Brooks watched from the Defiance Bridge as transport ships descended to the colony. Everything proceeded smoothly until sensors detected a Voraks battle group emerging from behind the system's gas giant. "They're learning too," Brooks muttered. "Tactical. Recommend new approach." Miller studied the data briefly. "They've positioned to cut off our previous escape vector. Suggest we deploy the Minnesota as a false flagship while the actual evacuations continue on the far side of the planet." The ploy worked. The Voraks concentrated their attack on the Minnesota, allowing the evacuation to proceed with minimal interference. The Minnesota survived, though heavily damaged, using the colony's moon for cover during its escape. After successfully evacuating New Salem, the fleet regrouped at a hidden rendezvous point. Alliance officers who had initially scoffed at human tactics now asked questions and reviewed battle footage. "I don't understand why your ships never form a proper line," said Brantarian Commander Zefik during a tactical review. "Because lines can be broken," Miller explained. "Flexible formations allow us to bend without breaking." As the human fleet prepared for their 3rd evacuation mission, word arrived that several Alliance commanders had begun incorporating human tactics into their training. Some even requested human advisors. But the greatest challenge still loomed. Intelligence reports confirmed that a massive Voraks fleet was converging on Nova Terra, the largest human colony in the sector, with over 2 million inhabitants. Brooks studied the reports with growing concern. Their previous evacuations had worked because they had time and manageable population numbers. Nova Terra would require something more, something the Alliance species might not understand or accept. "We need a new approach," he told Miller quietly. "Something the Voraks haven't seen from us yet." Miller nodded grimly. I have some ideas, sir, but the Alliance isn't going to like them. They don't have to like them, Brooks replied. They just have to let us try. The stand at Nova Terra. Nova Terra hung in space like a blue-green jewel, home to over 2 million colonists. From the observation deck of the Defiant, Captain Brooks could see the planet's night side dotted with city lights. Soon those cities would face the largest Vorax fleet yet detected. 2 million people, Lieutenant Miller said quietly, standing beside him. We'd need 3 weeks to evacuate them all. Intelligence says we have 4 days at most. Brooks nodded grimly. Then we need to buy more time. The plan they developed over the next 12 hours was unlike anything attempted before. When Brooks presented it to the combined Human Alliance command staff, the reaction was immediate and negative. This is madness, exclaimed Admiral Vexthor, slamming his scaled fist on the table. You intend to sacrifice ships deliberately. Brooks remained calm. Not sacrifice. Place at risk. There's a difference. He pointed to the tactical display showing the projected Vorax approach. We position our fastest ships here, and here. They appear vulnerable, drawing Vorax forces away from the evacuation corridors. Meanwhile, our main fleet creates a defensive shell around the planet. Commander Krell clicked his mandibles in agitation. The ships used as bait will almost certainly be destroyed. Maybe, Miller interjected. But each ship that draws away Vorax forces potentially saves hundreds of thousands of civilians. The debate continued for hours. Eventually, the Alliance officers unanimously refused to participate in what they called suicide missions. Only human crews would volunteer for the decoy positions. As preparations continued, Ambassador Carter visited Brooks in his ready room. The Alliance Council is disturbed by your strategy, she said. They're calling it reckless. Brooks looked up from his terminal. 2 million lives, Lily. Worth any risk. Carter nodded slowly. I know. That's why I've authorized the release of prototype shield technology from Earth's research division. It might give our decoy ships a fighting chance. When the Vorax fleet appeared 3 days later, the human plan was put into action. 12 ships, each with a volunteer crew, moved into positions designed to appear vulnerable. The largest, Gas Montana, commanded by Captain Jane Foster, took station near Nova Terra's moon. From the Defiant, Brooks coordinated the massive evacuation while monitoring the decoy ships. The Vorax took the bait, splitting their forces to pursue what they perceived as easy targets. Montana under heavy fire, reported Communications Officer Reeves. Captain Foster reports shield strength at 40% but holding. The Montana executed a series of daring maneuvers, drawing 3 Vorax battleships away from the planet. Similar reports came in from other decoy vessels. Each minute they survived meant more colonists reached safety. On the main view screen, Brooks watched as Captain Foster's ship absorbed punishing hits while leading its pursuers on a chase through the system's asteroid field. The Montana's new shields glowed brightly with each impact. She can't keep this up much longer, Miller said quietly. As if hearing her words, the Montana suddenly changed tactics. Instead of continuing to flee, it turned directly toward its pursuers and accelerated. What is she doing? Gasped an Alliance observer. Brooks watched with grim understanding. Creating a diversion within a diversion. The Montana rammed the lead Vorax ship at full speed. Both vessels erupted in a massive explosion that damaged the other Vorax ships nearby. The shock waves scattered the asteroid field, creating additional hazards for the pursuers. Throughout the system, other human decoy ships saw what happened and adopted similarly aggressive tactics. Not all survived, but their actions created confusion in the Vorax ranks. Meanwhile, the evacuation proceeded at maximum capacity. Transport ships filled with colonists streamed away from Nova Terra, protected by the main fleet's defensive screen. After 36 hours of continuous battle, the surviving decoy ships rejoined the main fleet. Of the 12 that volunteered, 7 returned. But their sacrifice had achieved the impossible. buying enough time to evacuate 1.7 million colonists. As the last transport cleared the planet, Brooks ordered the fleet to withdraw. They had accomplished something unprecedented. More importantly, they had demonstrated a kind of courage the Alliance had never understood before, the willingness to risk everything not for glory, but for the lives of others. Revelation. The wreckage of a Vorax scout ship floated in the docking bay of the Alliance flagship Celestial Harmony. Engineers and scientists from various species worked carefully to extract the ship's communication node, a biological mechanical component that served as the Vorax equivalent of a black box. Lieutenant Miller supervised the operation alongside Dr. Olivia Ward, Earth's leading xenobiologist. Both women wore protective suits as they approached the pulsing organ-like structure. "Careful," Ward cautioned. "It's still partially alive and may contain defense mechanisms." After hours of delicate work, they successfully removed the node and transferred it to a containment field. Alliance technicians connected translation matrices to decipher the Vorax communication patterns. Miller watched as the first translated data appeared on screens. Her eyes widened. "Captain Brooks needs to see this immediately," she said. In the Alliance Council chamber, the mood had shifted dramatically since the evacuation of Nova Terra. Representatives who had once dismissed humans now listened attentively as Ambassador Carter addressed them. "The sacrifice of human crews at Nova Terra has changed how we view this conflict," said Chairperson Ilara. "We wish to understand your species better." Carter's response was interrupted by the arrival of Brooks and Miller. The captain looked grim as he approached the central podium. "We've decoded the Vorax communication node," he announced. "What we found explains why they attack as they do." He activated the central display, showing translation excerpts. "The Vorax identify threats by predicting battle behaviors," Brooks explained. "They classify species based on aggression patterns." Miller stepped forward. "This is the key finding. They consider humans the most dangerous species in the Alliance, not despite our cowardly tactics, but because of them." Murmurs spread through the chamber as Brooks continued. "The Vorax are confused by our unpredictability. When Alliance ships attack in formation, the Vorax can calculate responses, but human ships never do what they expect." Carter smiled slightly. "Turns out being cowards makes us their worst nightmare." The council chamber erupted in discussion. When order returned, Chairperson Ilara asked the question on everyone's mind. "How do we use this information?" Carter stepped forward. "I believe it's time the council learned about Earth's military history in detail." Over the next several hours, Carter presented a simplified overview of human warfare. She showed how smaller forces had defeated larger ones throughout history using indirect approaches. She explained guerrilla warfare, asymmetric conflict, and strategic withdrawal. "Humans rarely won by being the strongest," she concluded. "We won by being adaptable. When faced with superior forces, we didn't match strength with strength. We found weaknesses and exploited them." General Vexfor, once the most vocal critic of human tactics, rose from his seat. "I must admit my error in judgment, Ambassador. Your species' approach to warfare is sophisticated in ways I fail to appreciate." "Not sophisticated," Carter corrected gently. "Necessary. Humans evolved on a planet where we were rarely the strongest creatures. We learned to survive against predators by using our minds." As the meeting concluded, a historic decision was reached. The Alliance would adopt human defensive principles in the ongoing conflict with the Vorax. More significantly, they would form joint human-alien squadrons where each species could learn from the others. Later, in a private meeting room, Brooks reviewed the new battle plans with Miller and Carter. "The Pellerin have already modified their ships to perform our hit-and-run maneuvers," Miller reported. "And the Zarksians are incorporating our defensive formations." Brooks nodded. "Progress. But the real test will be when we move beyond evacuation to counterattack." Carter looked troubled. "Some council members are already talking about taking the fight to the Vorax homeworlds. They're swinging from dismissing our tactics to embracing them too enthusiastically." Then we need to teach them the most important human military lesson of all, Brooks said. Knowing when not to fight is just as important as knowing how to fight. As they discussed the future, word arrived that Admiral Hayes of the Alliance Fleet had ordered the formation of a new joint task force. Its mission: develop a strategy to strike back against the Voraks using human principles. Its name: Task Force Sanctuary. Its commander: newly promoted Admiral Alan Brooks. The humans exchanged looks of surprise and determination. The Alliance had not merely accepted their approach, they had embraced it. Now came the hardest part: teaching warriors who valued glory above all else that sometimes the greatest victory came from patience. Counterattack. The combined Alliance human fleet assembled at the edge of the Arcturus system presented an unusual sight. Ships of 23 species arranged not in the traditional battle formation, but in the loose, adaptive pattern developed by Admiral Brooks and his staff. From the bridge of his new flagship, the Gas Resilience, Brooks surveyed the tactical display. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment. The largest Voraks mothership cluster ever detected had been located, and the Alliance was finally ready to strike back. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Commander Krell, now serving as Brooks' executive officer. The aliens' attitude toward humans had changed dramatically since Novaterra. Lieutenant Miller, status of training squadrons? Brooks asked. Miller, recently promoted to tactical command, checked her console. Mixed species crews performing at 93% efficiency in simulations. The Pellerin and Zarkshan ships have fully adapted to our maneuver protocols. Brooks nodded. Begin Phase 1. Throughout the fleet, human officers worked alongside alien counterparts. What had begun as reluctant cooperation had evolved into genuine respect. The Alliance species had proven quick studies of human military history once they overcame their initial resistance. The first phase of the counterattack unfolded exactly as planned. Small, fast ships approached the Voraks cluster, appearing to probe for weaknesses. When the Voraks responded aggressively, the ships retreated, just as expected. They're following the bait ships, Miller reported. Pursuit pattern consistent with previous encounters. Brooks watched calmly as the Voraks forces divided, chasing what they believed were vulnerable targets. Phase 2. The Alliance fleet shifted position, creating what appeared to be gaps in their defense. The Voraks, programmed to exploit weakness, adjusted their attack vectors to target these apparent vulnerabilities. They're committing their reserve forces, Miller announced. All Voraks battle groups are now engaged. On the Resilience's bridge, Ambassador Carter stood beside Chairperson Ilara, watching the battle unfold. I still don't understand, Ilara admitted. Your ships continue to retreat. When do we attack? Carter smiled. We already are attacking. Watch. As she spoke, the true nature of the human strategy became clear. The retreat was an illusion. Each backward movement positioned Alliance ships perfectly for a coordinated strike. The apparent gaps in their formation were actually kill zones. Execute Phase 3, Brooks ordered. Across the battlefield, Alliance ships suddenly reversed course and accelerated toward their pursuers. The Voraks, caught mid-maneuver, could not adjust quickly enough. Energy weapons and missile salvos struck with devastating precision. This is the culmination of everything we've taught them, Carter explained to Ilara. The ultimate cowardly tactic, appearing to retreat to draw the enemy into a trap. The Voraks mothership cluster, now isolated from its support craft, attempted to regroup. But the Alliance fleet, using human-inspired mobility warfare, never allowed them to form an effective defense. Mothership shields failing, reported Miller. Their coordination is breaking down. Brooks gave the final order. All ships, execute pattern Thermopylae. Named after an ancient Earth battle, the maneuver involved concentrated firepower from multiple angles against a superior force confined to a narrow engagement zone. Alliance ships fired in precise sequence, overwhelming the remaining Voraks defenses. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. When it ended, the Voraks fleet, once thought unbeatable, had been defeated with minimal Alliance casualties. The victory was not just tactical, but psychological. For the first time, the Alliance species understood that sometimes the path to victory required patience rather than aggression. In the days that followed, celebrations erupted across Alliance space. On the Resilience, Brooks found Miller analyzing battle data in the tactical room. "Something wrong with our victory, Lieutenant?" he asked. Miller looked up from her console. "No, sir. Just making notes for future engagements. The Voraks will adapt to these tactics eventually." Brooks nodded approvingly, always thinking ahead. "Very human of you." "Thank you, sir." She hesitated. "I heard something interesting in the mess hall today. The Ultharian warriors have started using human as a compliment. They called Zarxian Commander Vrax human in his thinking for choosing a tactical withdrawal instead of a costly frontal assault." Brooks laughed. From insult to compliment in 3 months. Not bad. Later, at an Alliance ceremony honoring the victory, Chairperson Ilara presented medals to the human officers who had transformed their approach to warfare.